regarding the grant funds for community facility, one thing that I failed to state in the PowerPoint presentation earlier is we pretty much limit the grant. It's not pretty much. We do limit the grant to equipment only. And the reason for that is when you get grant dollars, you sign a grant agreement. And if we're talking about something that involves real estate and we take a deed of trust, to secure our loan, then let's say that we made a $5,000 grant on a $100,000 project. Our grant agreement's going to say that 5% of that project has grant dollars in it, and if something happened with the property, that it was sold, changed ownership, or changed use, then that not just the $5,000 would be subject to repayment, but 5% of any consideration that was received. So if we're talking real estate, there could be some value appreciation there. And this has happened a time or two. And, folks that got a small grant and you had that percentage tied to it, you had value appreciation, they had to pay back considerably more than the grant dollars that they got. So for that reason, we make the grant dollars available for equipment only. Equipment's going to depreciate, makes life simpler for rural development and the customer in the long run. So I wanted to throw that out there. Has anybody got a specific project that you have a question about or anything that I could answer? If not, then I'll just sort of talk about some things that would help with getting started on a project and sort of the normal routine that we should follow. Okay. Well, recreation is probably the one area of what we call essential community facilities that we cannot participate in. But, some of that is also, some of that can be a matter of interpretation, like you can have a community center. And most community centers have a swimming pool. A lot of it is how you, and this was one of my old program directors that I used to work for saying, how you dress your monkey. If you don't refer to it in your preliminary architectural report and things of that nature as a recreation for that swimming pool, you call it wellness. You're going to have, some older folks there, getting exercise, fitness, things of that nature. You've got to, right. You can, walking trails, you put things like this plant is such and such, and information about it. It's an educational trail. So you got to get creative, which that goes to some of what I was going to say before about if we had questions or not. If not, I would discuss how we get started. I think that I can't overemphasize the necessity that if you decide you have a project, involve us early on. Get a meeting with us, other potential funders, and if it's going to be something where we're building a building or something of that nature and we got an architect involved or an engineer, let's have a meeting with them. Because, one thing that we that we have had that has changed since April is we have a different environmental procedure right now. And some things that we used to have to do environmental reports on that you would pay a consultant to do, there are some things now that we can call them categorically excluded, which means we're not disturbing previously undisturbed areas, and we're, take a utility project, for instance. If we're staying in the same trench as we were before, or if we're doing a sidewalk and it's like in-kind replacement, before we would have to do an environmental report. But now that would be considered categorically excluded, and we don't have that expense anymore. So, you know, you need to involve us early so that we could discuss, you know, environmental issues, and if we have any, if we can do the categorical exclusion, or if we're going to have to require a report. If it's something that's a major project, we might have to do what's called an environmental assessment, which would have publication requirements. So that's the type of thing we would talk about. But we would also, at the initial meeting, we would bring a preliminary architectural report guide that we would share with your architect or your engineer, and that tells them what we need in that PAR. It's going to be a combination of description of what's out there, what they're going to build, what the need is, why it's essential, and we're going to require some financial information. It's really called a preliminary architectural report and a financial feasibility report. So, you know, that having that meeting and getting that and having some discussion about the environmental as well would get us started and in the right direction. When we get that information from your architect, then Dwight, the person that's in Lebanon that works with me, that works this program, he would work with the state office staff. We have an engineer on staff in Richmond and an architect. Dwight typically works with the architect, and I usually work with the engineer. And we start moving toward developing the project. If it looks like it's something that we can do and it's feasible, then at that point we would probably extend an offer to fund the project, and at that point we issue what's called a letter of conditions. And the letter of conditions has, these are the things that have to be met for that project to eventually go to bid. There's some legal, some accounting requirements. Got to have certification from your accountant that you got books established the way we want them. Got to have the design from the architect. And depending on the nature of the project, we might secure it with real estate. If it's something where there's revenues coming in, like to a town or something like that, we'd probably go revenue bond. And those are a little simpler to close, and we really like general obligation bonds. You know, there are some costs associated with projects that have a revenue bond or that are secured with a deed of trust that can be avoided if we get a general obligation bond. So that's if you're a town or you're a county that has general obligation bond capacity, that's an advantage to you. But anyway, we get those items to meet the letter of conditions, and we bid the project. Hopefully we come in the money. If we don't come in the money, then that's one good thing about our community facility program. There is a lot of money. Virginia has a good bit of money, and the national office has a large reserve for community facility projects. So we have more funds than there is demand. Wouldn't you say that's a fair assessment, Ann? So we have no problem funding overruns, and then we would just close the loan on the project if we come in the money. And the way that we work after that is if it's a construction project, we have monthly progress meetings. The contractor will submit a pay request each month. We order money monthly and hopefully get the project to completion. And of course, if it's a project that has a cost of $100,000 or more, then we require payment and performance bonds from the contractor. Payment bond to ensure that, you know, we don't have a mechanic's lien situation, something like that come up down the road. Performance bond to make sure that hopefully that we get a good product. But if your contractor doesn't have problem getting bonded, then you're not likely to have a problem with that. If they've had problems in the past, they're going to have problems getting bonds. So that pretty much takes care of itself in most instances. So, you know, that is, if you don't have any questions, you know, I think we covered things pretty good in the PowerPoint. Does anybody have a question about a community facility project, potential, or anything? Well, public works is probably a little bit of a stretch. You know, public safety has probably been more like fire trucks, things with, you know, involving ambulances, police vehicles. Dwight, my counterpart, I'd say over the last 5 or 6 years, he's probably funded 30 or 40 vehicles for police departments. Only hiccup we had during that time was with the ARA funding. We had a little bit of problem with some vehicles being American made. Some folks didn't get the vehicle that they wanted because, you know, they had to conform to the Buy American requirements. I passed out my card, but let me give you Dwight's name, and his name is Dwight Pearson. If you'll write that on my card, and that's Pierson. And Dwight's, of course, you can reach him at the same phone number, but Dwight's extension is 121. And he would be your ultimate contact. Let me give you 121. And it's Dwight Pearson. That's Pierson. Mm-hmm. Yeah, Richard, I can't really answer that question to know that I'm giving the right answer. I don't know if Ann can either. You know, I'm a little disadvantaged because it's Dwight's program and not mine, but Right.
I know we're off topic with the water and sewer, but the water, well, no, I was just going to, as a point of reference, the water and sewer programs go to the authority or the locality or whatever, but they don't do the individual tap to the user. But some of our residential programs can pick up that side. So often where one program stops, another one can pick it up. So it could very well be the same case here. So great question. Oh, yeah. While we're talking about community facilities, something else that's brand new, hot off the press, there are flyers out there on the table, is called Uplift America. And there's a talk about partners. Remember, I've got the partnering hat on. A new partnership between a large philanthropic organization and leveraging other dollars through community development financial institutions, which are called CDFIs. If you've ever heard of Virginia Community Capital, they're one of those. There's only a few of those in the state. But nonetheless, between the philanthropic organization and the population of these approved lenders called CDFIs, they are primed and ready to offer low-cost financing once again in the rural parts of the country. So it's if you've sat in any of the sessions today, you've probably picked up on our ability to re-lend money through some of these programs, and that's what that is designed to do. So it's brand new coming, and for really the first time in my way more years than I care to admit now, we're getting involved with the philanthropic organizations, which have a great desire to make an impact in the rural parts of the country. So something new and great. So be on the lookout for that, and we'll see where that takes us in Virginia.
Well, it would depend on first off, I'm assuming we're dealing with either a county agency or state agency. Okay, who would it be with the state? Okay. That is probably somebody we could work with. Sounds to me like, yes. We have to be careful if an entity is getting their sources primarily from the state rather than the local. Would they be getting most of their operating money from the local government? Mm-hmm. Right. If they're primarily local, I think we could work with them. Okay. Probably could work with that.
Is that the name of the?
I'm glad you caught that.
Well, no. The reason I asked that, we're on a national level looking at a recreational financing toolkit from rural development and other federal partners, and even state partners for that matter. So if you don't mind, give me your card, because we're putting together that toolkit, which will also display examples. And we typically, and this is what he was going to say, as a community facility, we don't often, or really, we're not supposed to finance true recreation, but now we're looking at recreational type opportunities as a means of economic growth. So we're kind of twisting our hat just a little bit, and that it's more, we use that term loosely, but it's more along the lines of, health and wellness with trails and things like that are, promoting our greater well-being, which of course is another part of what USDA does. So it's a little twist to what we, typically would consider a recreational type deal, but it's almost part of the creative economy. So we're looking at that a little bit differently. So anyway, if you'll share that info with me, then we'll get you connected there. But no golf courses.
No, nothing like a golf course. But we already talked. We already talked earlier before you were here about calling something educational. Sometimes it can have a little bit of recreational aspect to it, but it's how you describe your project sometimes. Any other questions or anything? The one thing I might not have mentioned in the PowerPoint, I can't recall if I did or not, was I know I talked about the 40-year term and the interest rate. Sometimes folks will say, 40 years is a long time. I don't know if we want to pay interest that long. Well, most of the folks we deal with on community facilities initially have that need for the 40-year term, because whatever it is that you're just getting off the ground, it may be, that it builds momentum over time, and you might need that lower rate and the extended life of the loan. If at some point you see that there's advantage to refinancing, then, we have no prepayment penalty, either on the water and sewer loans or the community facility loans. You just pay the interest that's accrued since the last payment that was made. There's nothing to try to catch any of the revenue that would have been realized. No tricky financing, in other words. It's no prepayment penalty. So I want to throw that out there. Yes. Are there any other questions? Uh-huh. Okay. Well, I'd say if you don't have any other questions, enjoy some refreshments.